This video presents the historical development of pragmatism in education together with the key thinkers and their respective contributions. Pragmatism emerged in the late 19th century as a distinctly American philosophy that emphasized action, experience, and practical results. Education from this perspective is not about memorizing eternal truths, but about cultivating the ability to think, act, and solve problems effectively in real-life situations. Pragmatism reshaped education into a dynamic process of growth, adaptation, and democratic participation, deeply rooted in human experience and continuous inquiry. Let's start with Charles Sanders Peirce, who is considered as the founder of pragmatism. During his time in the late 19th century, American philosophy sought a balance between speculative idealism and mechanistic realism. Pragmatism arose from this search, aiming to make philosophy at once scientific, practical, and grounded in experience. Peirce laid the logical and scientific foundation of pragmatism, inspiring educational practices rooted in problem-solving, inquiry, and reflective thinking, principles that would shape later progressive education movements. He introduced the pragmatic maxim, asserting that the meaning of an idea lies in its practical consequences. For him, education is a process of inquiry and experimentation, guided by the scientific method. Learners, like scientists, should test hypotheses and revise beliefs based on evidence and experience. Let us have William James. During his time, by the late 1800s, pragmatism expanded beyond logic and science to address the psychological and personal dimensions of human experience. James made pragmatism accessible and human-centered, linking it to psychology and the lived experience of learners. His focus on emotion, adaptability, and personal growth helped lay the groundwork for modern, progressive, and student-centered education. James emphasized that truth is what works for the individual, validated by its usefulness and capacity to help one navigate experience. For him, education must encourage active problem-solving and meaningful engagement. He championed freedom, individuality, and flexibility in learning, urging teachers to adapt instruction to students' needs and interests. Another familiar individual here is John Dewey. During his time, at the turn of 20th century, pragmatism became a dominant educational philosophy in the United States. Rapid industrialization demanded an education that prepared citizens for democratic and scientific living. Dewey revolutionized modern education, grounding it in experience, democracy, and reflective thought. His learning by doing approach promoted project-based learning, interdisciplinary study, and the teacher as a guide rather than an authority. Dewey viewed knowledge as arising from the interaction between human beings and their environment. Truth, for him, was provisional and evolving, tested by its practical consequences with experience. For him, education is life itself, and the school is a miniature society. We also have Jane Addams, who is a social ethics and democratic educator. During her time in the early 20th century, as social reform movements grew, pragmatism found expression in efforts to connect education with community life and social justice. Addams extended pragmatism into the realm of social education, emphasizing the school's role in fostering democracy, empathy, and moral responsibility. Her work laid the foundations for modern service learning and community-based education. Adams believed that education should address real social problems and promote ethical growth through experience. She developed programs combining learning, work, and community service, enabling immigrants and the working class to learn through participation in civic life. For her, education should address real social problems. George Herbert Mead, a social pragmatist. During his time in the early 20th century, pragmatism expanded to include the social and communicative dimensions of human learning and development. Mead extended pragmatism into social learning theory, influencing collaborative learning, group work, and democratic classroom environments that nurture both intellectual and social development. Mead emphasized that the self emerges through social interaction and that communication, cooperation, and shared meaning are essential for personal and collective growth. For him, education must emphasize that the classroom is a social community where students learn through collaboration, dialogue, and mutual respect. We have William Hurd Kilpatrick, a proponent for project method. During his time in the early to mid 20th century, pragmatism provided the philosophical basis for progressive education, emphasizing activity, purpose, and relevance. Kilpatrick gave pragmatism practical classroom expression, offering teachers a concrete framework for active, experiential, and student-driven learning, which is an approach that remains central to 21st century pedagogy. As a close follower of Dewey, Kilpatrick believed that learning occurs best through purposeful activity chosen by the learner. For him, education must be organized around students' chosen projects, in which learning connect directly to real-life problems and interests. A neo-pragmatist in the person of Richard Rorty. During his time, by the late 20th century, pragmatism evolved into neo-pragmatism, engaging with postmodern concerns about truth, language, and social construction. Rorty renewed pragmatism for the modern era, emphasizing pluralism, flexibility, and democratic dialogue. He promoted open-mindedness, dialogue, and adaptability, encouraging students to think critically, reflecting on diverse perspectives, and engaging constructively in pluralistic societies. Rorty rejected the idea of objective or universal truth, arguing instead that truth is created through conversation and social consensus, not discovered through fixed principles. For him, education is a conversation among diverse voices. We now have Cornel West, a prophetic pragmatist and an advocate of moral education. During his time, in the late 20th and early 21st century until the present, pragmatism re-emerged as a tool for cultural critique and moral reflection, addressing race, inequality, and democracy. West revitalized pragmatism's moral and democratic dimensions, linking it to social justice, cultural identity, and transformative learning in contemporary education. West's prophetic pragmatism blends Deweyan democracy with religious and existential insight, urging individuals to pursue truth through justice, compassion, and dialogue. For him, education must develop both critical intelligence and moral courage, preparing students to confront ethical and social challenges in a diverse society. At present, pragmatism remains deeply embedded in progressive and experiential learning models, especially in problem-based, project-based, and inquiry-based education. Its focus on learning by doing is central to 21st century skills education, collaborative learning, and democratic classroom environments. Modern educational reforms that stress adaptability, reflection, and relevance trace their roots to pragmatic thought. Pragmatism remains one of the most practical and life-affirming philosophies in the history of education. Pragmatism transformed education from a rigid process of memorization into a living, dynamic experience grounded in problem-solving, experimentation, and democracy. Across history, pragmatism has continually adapted to meet the needs of changing societies. The pragmatist tradition reminds us that education is the cultivation of intelligent action and teaching learners how to inquire, reflect, and act responsibly in an ever-evolving world. This has been the historical development of pragmatism and education. For more helpful videos in related education courses, you may subscribe to this channel. Thank you in advance.